Hi, my name's Aria. And at my parents' anniversary dinner, they sat me in the hallway, next to a trash can. My mother leaned over and said, "Be grateful you were even invited." I didn't slam the door. When I left, I just vanished. 3 minutes later, they were panicking, pretending to care, like love could be restored by fear. But that night wasn't the beginning of my story. It was the breaking point after years of being erased, ignored, rewritten out of my own family's history. And maybe you felt that too, when the people who should protect you become the ones who quietly destroy you. So tell me, what would you do if your own family treated you like you didn't exist? The drive from Denver to Aspen took me just under 4 hours, but it felt much longer. The road curved through the mountains, sunlight slipping between the peaks, then fading as clouds rolled in. By the time I reached the resort, dusk had started to stain the snowcaps gray. My fingers had been gripping the steering wheel tighter than they should have. I told myself it was just the cold, but I knew better. I wasn't nervous about the drive. I was nervous about walking into that ballroom. The Ashford family's 50th wedding anniversary. My parents' milestone. Their golden year. The kind of celebration most daughters would look forward to. Except I wasn't most daughters, and my mother, Verity Ashford, never let me forget it. I parked near the back entrance of the mountain resort, next to a row of polished luxury cars. The kind of cars my sisters drove. I caught my reflection in the glass window. Navy dress, hair tied low, pearl earrings I'd bought myself years ago. Simple, understated. Safe. I always played it safe when it came to family gatherings. It made me easier to overlook. Inside, the place glowed. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and the smell of roses so strong it almost made me lightheaded. Waiters floated around with trays of drinks, smiling mechanically. Everyone else looked polished, rehearsed, men in tailored suits, women draped in gowns that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I found the registration table near the entrance. A young woman with an overly bright smile checked names off a list. "Welcome. Name, please?" "Aria Ashford," I said quietly. The pause was brief, but sharp. Her pen stopped midair. "Oh, right," she said, scanning the chart again. I could see her eyes flicker with something, sympathy, maybe discomfort. "You're here." "Here," I repeated softly. She hesitated before pointing toward the far side of the ballroom, her voice faltering. "You're seated just outside the main area. Table 19. I followed her gesture and saw it. My place card, propped delicately next to a gray metal trash can near the staff corridor. My name printed in elegant cursive, as if formality could disguise humiliation. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. I even laughed a little under my breath, like maybe the absurdity would make it less painful. But no one corrected it. No one stopped me. I stood there, half in the hallway, half in the ballroom, the hum of conversations spilling over me like static. Through the open doors, I could see my mother, her posture regal, champagne in hand, laughing with friends as if she'd been born to rule that room. My eldest sister, Seraphine, stood beside her in a gold dress that shimmered under the lights. She looked radiant, of course. Seraphine always did. She had that effortless grace that made people adore her even when she didn't deserve it. My niece Zinnia, phone in hand, was already live-streaming the event for her thousands of followers. 50 years of love, she chirped into her camera, turning the lens toward my parents. Her mother, Seraphine, smiled wide, basking in it. I waited for my turn to be noticed. It didn't come. A waiter passed by, glancing awkwardly at my spot. "You sure you're okay sitting here, ma'am?" he asked. "I'm sure someone thought it was appropriate," I said. My tone came out sharper than I intended. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but thought better of it. He disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me with a faint scent of disinfectant and the soft hum of the trash compactor. I sat down anyway. For a moment, I told myself to stay quiet, stay calm, stay invisible. That's what I'd always done. But as laughter echoed from the other side of the doors, something twisted inside me. Seraphine's voice carried across the hall microphone. "Let's raise a glass," she said, her tone bright and clear. to the love that built this family, and to the parents who taught us everything we know. Her us didn't include me. It never did. When the applause started, I felt my chest tighten. I tried to sip my drink, but the glass trembled slightly in my hand. I wasn't angry yet, just hollow. I looked around. No one even noticed I wasn't inside the main room. My mother's friends filled the tables closest to her. Business partners, church acquaintances, the kind of people who thought my family was the picture of grace. They didn't know what it was like behind the curtain. I tried to stand, but my knees hesitated. Part of me still wanted to pretend this wasn't deliberate, that maybe someone mixed up the seating chart. But then I caught my mother's gaze through the open doorway.
She saw me. I know she did.
Our eyes met for just a heartbeat. Then she looked away, smiling at another guest, her face smooth and practiced. That was the moment I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I walked toward her table, the sound of my heels tapping against the marble floor. Every step felt heavier than the last. People turned their heads, conversations paused. When I reached her side, I forced my voice to stay calm. "Mom, can I talk to you for a second?" Verity barely turned her head. "Not now, Arya," she said, her smile never breaking. "It'll only take a second." Her sigh was soft but sharp enough to cut through the noise. She motioned for Seraphine to hold her drink. "What is it?" "I was wondering if there was a mix-up with the seating," I said. "My card's by the hallway." Her expression didn't change. "That's where your place is, dear." "My place?" She smiled thinly, eyes flicking over me. "Be grateful you were even invited." There it was, the line that landed like a slap. A few heads turned nearby, catching just enough to make me feel smaller. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Seraphine glanced between us with mild amusement. "Oh, Arya," she said lightly, "you're always so sensitive." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Every apology I'd swallowed for years burned at the back of my throat. All the holidays I'd spent alone, the birthdays they forgot, the excuses they made. This wasn't new. It was just louder, brighter, more public. My father sat beside my mother, his expression distant. He didn't look up. He never did. Something inside me shifted then. It wasn't anger. Not yet. Just clarity. I set my drink down gently on the edge of the table. "Enjoy your evening," I said quietly. And then I turned around and walked away. No one called my name. No one stopped me. The air in the hallway was cooler, quieter. My heels clicked against the tile as I moved past the catering stations, the scent of roast beef and perfume fading behind me. Outside, the wind cut across the parking lot, sharp and clean. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding my breath until I exhaled. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. I just left. I didn't slam the door when I left. I just stepped into the night air and kept walking until the laughter from inside faded into a faint hum. My heels clicked against the cobblestone driveway, steady, echoing, like each step was sealing a decision I hadn't realized I'd already made. The cold bit at my skin, but I didn't shiver. The wind carried the faint notes of music from the ballroom, muffled by thick glass and money. Out here, there was nothing but silence, pine trees, and the scent of snow. I walked toward the edge of the resort's parking lot where the lights started to thin out. My breath came out in slow clouds, each one dissolving before I could even see it fully. I didn't have a coat. I hadn't thought that far ahead when I stood up from the table and walked away. I'd thought about my dignity. I'd thought about the years of quiet endurance. But not the weather. The asphalt glittered slightly with frost, and I stopped beside my car, leaning against the door for a second. My reflection in the tinted glass didn't look angry, just empty, hollow in a way that almost felt peaceful. Inside the ballroom, I imagined Seraphine starting another round of toasts, pretending not to notice I was gone. My mother, Verity, probably smiling for the cameras. That woman could hold a pose through an earthquake. But I also knew her tells, the way her left hand twitched when something went wrong, how her jaw clenched when control slipped. She'd feel it soon. The shift. The absence. The imbalance of me not being where she expected me to be. I closed my eyes for a second, and her voice replayed in my head, sharp, deliberate, coated in sugar. Be grateful you were even invited. The words stung, even out here. They lingered like smoke, heavy and impossible to wash off. I'd heard versions of that line my whole life, just wrapped differently. Be nice, Arya. Don't make it about you. You know how your sister is. Why can't you be more like it didn't matter how it was phrased? It always meant the same thing. Know your place, stay small, don't make them uncomfortable. But that night, standing outside that ridiculous, gold-drenched hotel, I realized something I hadn't before. They had built an entire system on my silence. And for the first time, I wasn't giving it to them. I opened my car door and sat inside, not ready to drive yet. The seats were cold, the kind that held on to mountain chill long after sunset. I turned on the ignition, and the dashboard lights flickered to life, soft blue against the dark. I didn't move. I just sat there, listening to the faint hum of the heater. I thought about calling anyone, but realized I didn't have anyone I could call without having to explain the humiliation. My friends knew my family was complicated, but not like this. They thought I just didn't get along with my sister. They didn't know what it meant to be erased on purpose. I let my head fall back against the seat, staring at the car's ceiling. Somewhere behind those walls, they were probably just now realizing I wasn't there. Maybe a waiter had mentioned it. Maybe Zinnia, ever the digital documentarian, had turned her camera around and noticed the empty seat by the trash bin. I pictured the scene vividly, the photographer calling for the Ashford family photo, Seraphine straightening her dress, Verity glancing around, realizing one child was missing. The perfect portrait disrupted. I could almost hear her hiss, "Where's Arya?" before disguising it behind another smile. It wasn't revenge that made me smile then. It was freedom. Let them look for me, I thought. Let them feel what absence feels like for once. I'd spent my entire life chasing their approval, showing up for dinners, birthdays, crises. The one time I didn't, they would panic, not because they missed me, but because my absence threatened the picture they sold to everyone else. The heater finally warmed the air. I kicked off my heels one by one and tucked my feet under me. The silence outside pressed against the windows, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was clean. I caught myself glancing at my phone. No messages yet. Not even a "where are you?" I could picture Seraphine's irritation building, Verity whispering damage control instructions, Zinnia nervously refreshing her live feed to see if anyone online noticed. I leaned my head against the window, feeling the faint vibration of bass through the walls. Somewhere inside, another toast was probably being made. Another speech about unity, love, family legacy. It would sound perfect on camera. I whispered to no one. They don't deserve access to my pain anymore. The words came out soft but steady, surprising me with their certainty. I'd said versions of that before in my head, but never out loud. This time it felt final. The wind picked up, brushing snow off the pine branches nearby. The flakes caught the light from the parking lot lamps, spinning in slow circles before settling. It was beautiful in a way I hadn't noticed when I arrived. Back then, everything had felt suffocating. Expectation, pressure, the unspoken hierarchy that made even air feel political. Now, standing outside it all, I could finally breathe. I turned the key off and sat there in the dark for another moment, letting my eyes adjust. The phone screen lit up. One notification. Zinnia posted a new video. Family Forever Red Heart Ashford 50. I almost laughed. The irony was too perfect. Family forever, as long as I stayed out of frame. I didn't click it. I didn't want to see the smiles, the speeches, the applause for people who'd spent years convincing me I was difficult. I didn't need to hear Verity's smooth voice thanking everyone for making this family what it is. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled down until I found my mother's number. I hovered over it. For a second, I imagined calling her, not to argue, but to say something like, "You've finally done it. You've lost me." But even that felt like giving her power she didn't deserve. So I didn't call. I powered the phone off completely. The screen went black. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything I'd kept buried under politeness and obligation. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. I didn't cry. The tears had been burned out long ago. What came instead was a steady, calm certainty. They'd look for me. They'd make calls. They'd spin stories about me being emotional, maybe even unstable. Verity would play the victim.
She always did.
But I didn't care. Let them scramble. Let them whisper. Let them feel the space I left behind. Because for once, I wasn't the one begging to be seen. When I finally started the car again, it wasn't to flee, it was to reclaim. I drove slowly down the mountain road, the resort lights shrinking behind me until they disappeared completely. The night stretched ahead, vast and quiet. Aspen's back streets wound through darkness, the snow-muted world around me still and listening. At a red light near the edge of town, I stopped and looked in the rearview mirror. My face was lit by the faint dashboard glow, soft shadows tracing the lines I'd earned over years of trying to be the good daughter. I didn't look broken. I looked awake. The light turned green. And I drove on. The next morning came gray and quiet, the kind of morning that didn't care about your emotions. The kind that simply existed. My apartment still smelled faintly of the perfume I'd worn the night before, now mixed with the stale scent of disappointment. I hadn't slept much. My phone had vibrated through the night, calls, texts, voicemails, but I didn't listen to any of them. I just watched the screen light up, go dark, and light up again. When I finally got up, the sky over Denver was the color of dull metal. I made coffee I didn't want and sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the wall. That's when the email came through. The subject line read, "Final Cut, Ashford 50th Anniversary Video." It was from the photographer, a kind man named David I'd spoken with once at the event. I almost deleted it without looking, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked the Dropbox link. The screen buffered for a moment before the video opened. A soft piano intro, slow zoom on my parents laughing, champagne glasses raised. The kind of polished montage that made everything look perfect. I leaned back in my chair and waited. My segment was supposed to come right after my niece Zinnia's. I'd filmed it a week earlier at my apartment. Simple, honest, heartfelt. Just me in front of a window, talking about my parents' love, how much I admired their endurance even when things weren't easy. It wasn't fancy, but it was sincere. Zinnia finished her bubbly message about legacy and love. The music swelled. Then cut. Straight to Seraphine giving a speech on stage, flawless as always, her voice dripping with poise. My segment never appeared. Not even a second. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it had been trimmed for time, or lost in the upload. I replayed it twice, scrolling the timeline, waiting for my face to appear. It never did. My name wasn't even listed in the credits. I felt something heavy drop in my stomach, that slow, sick realization you can't talk yourself out of. This wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. I scrolled through my inbox and found David's number. My hands shook as I called. He answered after 2 rings, his voice friendly at first. "Hey, Aria. I was just finishing some last-minute edits for the client." "David," I cut in, trying to steady my voice. "I just watched the final video. My segment's gone." There was a pause, the kind that says more than words ever could.
Oh, yeah.
"The client, your sister, Seraphine, she asked for a few changes before delivery." "Changes?" "She sent me a note saying certain clips weren't necessary. I assumed she cleared it with you." "She didn't." He sighed, quiet, apologetic. "I'm really sorry. It's not my call. She was the point of contact for the family." I stared at the laptop screen, the cursor blinking like a pulse. So she had my words deleted. "I'm afraid so." I managed to thank him before hanging up. My voice didn't even crack. I just sat there, phone in hand, staring at nothing. The betrayal wasn't about the video. Not really. It was about the pattern, the constant, deliberate erasure of anything that didn't fit the family's picture of perfection. My life, my effort, my place, all airbrushed out like I was a smudge on glass. My eyes drifted to a framed photo on the wall. It was from Seraphine's wedding 8 years ago. She stood radiant in lace, her hand resting on her husband's chest. My parents stood beside her, proud. Everyone always said it was the most beautiful wedding they'd ever attended. They didn't know I'd paid for most of it. Back then, Seraphine had just started her law career. She'd been drowning in student debt, her fiancé's business was failing, and our parents were too old to help financially.
So I did.
I'd been working overtime shifts at the clinic, barely keeping up with my own rent, but I still wired the money, almost everything I had in savings. I told myself it was family, it was love, it was what you do. During the reception, I remember standing near the back, watching as they toasted each other. "We couldn't have done this without Mom and Dad," Seraphine said into the microphone, her smile dazzling. "They've been our rock." No mention of me. Not a word. After that, I told myself it didn't matter, that I hadn't done it for recognition. But sitting there now, watching myself edited out of yet another family memory, I realized how wrong I'd been. Recognition wasn't about ego, it was about truth. I stood up and walked toward the window. The morning light was weak, filtered through low clouds. Cars passed below, people rushing to jobs, appointments, lives that didn't involve rehearsed affection and curated lies. For a fleeting second, I envied them. I opened my phone again. There were 3 new messages from Seraphine. The first, "Did you get the video link?" The second, "You're welcome, by the way." The third, "I had to cut your clip, it didn't fit the tone." Didn't fit the tone. I almost laughed. The words were so perfectly her, clinical, detached, as if she were editing a report, not deleting her sister's existence. I typed back, "You didn't need to erase me to make your life look better. You could have just told the truth." Then I deleted it before hitting send. She didn't deserve that energy. Instead, I closed the laptop, made another cup of coffee, and stood quietly in my kitchen until the silence started to feel like armor instead of punishment. I thought about the years I'd spent swallowing every slight, every cutting remark disguised as advice. About how I'd learned to apologize for things I didn't do, just to keep the peace. But this was the final straw. When people erase you enough times, you start realizing the only way to be seen again is to stop standing in their frame. I sat down, opened a new email, and typed a simple sentence to David. "Thank you for your work. I understand now. Please send me the raw files of my clip." He replied within minutes. "Of course. Sending it now." The download bar crawled slowly across the screen. I watched every second of it load. When it was done, I opened the file. There I was, sitting by my window, voice steady, eyes soft but real. I was talking about my parents' resilience, about forgiveness. I sounded like someone who still believed there was goodness left to save. I watched myself finish the last line. "Family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up." I exhaled a long, slow breath. "You did show up," I whispered. "And they still tried to erase you. But not this time. Not again." I transferred the video to a flash drive and tucked it into the drawer by my desk. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew it mattered. Proof mattered. The apartment was quiet again, but the silence didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt deliberate. I sat there, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the world moving on outside my window. And for the first time, I let myself think, not about what I'd lost, but what I was no longer willing to lose. This wasn't about being the better daughter, or proving anything. It was about reclaiming what had always been mine, the truth of who I was, even if no one wanted to see it. As I poured the last of my coffee, my phone vibrated again. Another email. This one from a name I hadn't seen in years, my father's former attorney. The subject line read, "Regarding your father's estate, please review attached documents." My hand froze midair. I clicked it open. The email sat at the top of my inbox like a small, glowing bomb. I hadn't planned to open it right away. I told myself I'd wait until lunch, maybe read it after my shift when my mind is calmer. But that was a lie. My finger hovered over the subject line, "Regarding your father's estate, please review attached documents," and before I could think twice, I clicked it. The message was short, polite, formal, the kind of tone lawyers use when they know what they're sending is about to ruin your peace. "Good afternoon, Ms. Ashford," it began. Attached, please find a copy of the 2014 version of your late father's will, as requested during his previous estate planning meetings. You may wish to compare it with the final executed document for your records. Wishing you well, and then a signature I hadn't seen in years. Eugene Caldwell, attorney at law. The attachment was a PDF labeled Ashford_will_draft_2014 PDF. I clicked it open. It took only a few lines before my stomach tightened. There it was, my name, typed neatly next to Seraphine's, listed as co-beneficiaries of our parents' property, the Ashford residence, Aspen, Colorado, to be shared equally between daughters, Seraphine and Aria. I scrolled further. In the final version, the one read to us after Dad's passing 2 years ago, my name was nowhere to be found. Only hers. I set my coffee down too fast, spilling a dark ring across my paperwork. The liquid spread slowly across the table, like it was giving me time to breathe before the realization landed. I'd been erased again. At first, I told myself maybe Dad had changed it himself. Maybe he thought I didn't need a house. I'd been financially stable, independent. Seraphine had a family to provide for. That's what everyone said. But then I remembered the last conversation I'd had with him, a quiet afternoon in that same house, just before his health started failing. Make sure your mother's taken care of, he told me, voice low. And don't let your sister bully you out of what's fair. He had looked tired, his eyes already dimming around the edges. I remember laughing it off, brushing his hand. Dad, Seraphine doesn't scare me. He'd smiled a little, the way fathers do, when they know something you don't. She should. I scrolled through the rest of the will, feeling the heat rise in my chest. My pulse thudded against my temples. Then, without really thinking, I grabbed my phone and dialed the number at the bottom of the email. Caldwell Law, a young receptionist answered. Eugene, please. It's Aria Ashford. There was a pause. One moment, Miss Ashford. The line clicked, and then his voice came through, older now, rougher.
Aria.
My goodness. It's been a long time. It has, I said. You sent me a copy of my father's will, the earlier one.
Yes.
You requested it through the records office last month. I didn't, I said. But thank you for sending it anyway. I just have one question. Who handled the changes for the final version? A beat of silence. Your sister, Seraphine, he said finally. She came to see me about 6 months before your father's passing. She said your parents wanted to simplify things. Simplify. I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. Did my father come with her? No, he said quietly. But she brought signed directives, medical documents, updated power of attorney. All properly notarized. Properly notarized, I repeated. So she handled everything. She was persuasive. You know your sister. I did. Better than anyone. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. My face looked calm, but my body wasn't. My shoulders were rigid, jaw tight. The fluorescent lights above me hummed, filling the small break room at work with a sound that made me feel trapped. The irony wasn't lost on me. I worked in healthcare compliance, helping elderly clients protect their finances from manipulation. And here I was, the daughter of a man whose estate had been quietly rewritten under my nose. I pressed my hands flat against the table and took a slow breath. For a moment, I thought back to the house in Aspen, not the grand version that people saw at the anniversary party, but the real one. The home my father had nearly lost a decade earlier. I could still see that day clearly. He'd called me late one evening, his voice lower than usual. Aria, your mother can't know I called, but the mortgage is behind. I can't catch up. I was 31 then, still paying off student loans, scraping by on hospital shifts. But I didn't hesitate. I wired him $25,000 the next morning. It was everything I had in savings. He'd thanked me once, in the kind of quiet that meant more than words, and promised to pay me back when things got better. He never did. And that was fine. I hadn't done it for repayment. But now, staring at that will, realizing Seraphine had rewritten history to claim that house as hers alone, something inside me broke. She hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen memory. I stood up and walked toward the office window, watching the Denver skyline blur behind glass. Below, people moved like tiny figures on autopilot. I wondered how many of them were carrying quiet betrayals in their pockets, just like me. When my phone buzzed, I almost didn't look. But the name on the screen stopped me cold. Seraphine. I let it ring twice before answering. Aria, she said, her voice smooth, professional, the same tone she used in courtrooms. I hear you've been contacting Dad's old lawyer.
Funny, I said.
I didn't realize I needed your permission to look at my own father's records. You don't, she replied quickly, a hint of warning beneath the sugar. But you should be careful. You're poking around in things you don't understand. I understand enough, I said quietly. I understand you had him removed from his own decisions before he could fight back. She exhaled sharply. That's absurd. You're imagining things again. Dad made his own choices. Without ever leaving his bed? Don't start, she snapped. I'm not doing this with you. You already did it, I said, and ended the call. For a long time, I just stood there, phone still in hand, breathing through the shaking. I wasn't going to cry. Not this time. I opened my email and started typing before my fear could talk me out of it. Subject: I know what you did. Body: this isn't about the house. It's about decency. I won't stay silent anymore. I hit send. The whoosh of the email leaving felt like a release and a promise at the same time. I walked over to the coffee maker, poured myself another cup, and leaned against the counter. My hands were steady now. The rage had burned into something quieter, a focus I hadn't felt in years. They could take my name off a document. They could erase my words from videos. They could pretend I never helped, never cared, never gave. But they couldn't change what was true. Somewhere deep down, I felt my father's voice again, faint but certain. She should scare you. He'd been right. But not anymore. Because the only person who needed to be feared now was me. The silence after sending that email didn't last long. My phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up the dark kitchen. It wasn't Seraphine. It was my mother. Her message was short, only one sentence, but it carried the same sharp precision she used to keep everyone in line. If you want to stress me more in my condition, go ahead. My heart can't take much more. I read it twice, trying to decide whether it was genuine concern or another performance. The phrasing was too deliberate. The guilt perfectly measured. It was a language she'd spoken fluently my whole life, emotional leverage disguised as love. For a brief moment, I felt that familiar tug, the instinct to call, to apologize for something I hadn't done, to smooth things over. But I didn't. Not this time. I let her message sit there, glowing on the screen like a test I refused to take. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the will again. The older one, the real one. I stared at my name, typed clearly beside Seraphine's. Co-beneficiary. Equal heir. The truth right there in black and white. I didn't respond to my mother's text. I didn't send an explanation or justification. I simply forwarded the document, attaching both versions of the will, to Seraphine's email. And I CC'd Verity. No words. No commentary. Just facts. For once, I wanted silence to be the message. The moment I hit send, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Like I'd just taken back something that had been stolen, not property, but dignity. The quiet after that felt heavier than any argument could have. The rest of the evening moved slowly. I made myself dinner, but barely touched it. The apartment was filled with the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional honk from the street below. I watched the city lights flicker through the blinds and thought about how different life looked from this distance, how people could seem so bright from far away, even when they were rotting underneath. My phone stayed silent for an hour. Then 2. By 9, I gave up pretending to work and turned off my laptop. I was halfway to bed when it rang again. Mom, I whispered to myself before even checking the screen. Her name glowed against the black display. I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. Aria? Her voice was soft, almost trembling. Are you trying to kill me? Do you know what stress does to someone my age? I closed my eyes. Mom, you're not dying? You don't know that, she said quickly, her tone gathering strength. My chest has been tight all day. I could barely sleep last night. I'm too old for this kind of emotional torture. Then stop torturing yourself, I said gently. There was a pause, the kind that usually came before she twisted the knife. I saw what you sent, she said finally. Do you realize how humiliating this is? Sending legal documents to your own mother? You're making us look like fools. I sent the truth, I said. If that's humiliating, that's not my fault. You've always been dramatic, she replied. You read too much into things. Your father would never have wanted this. My voice hardened. Dad wanted fairness. I have proof of that now. Proof, she snapped. Don't you dare use that word with me. Your father trusted your sister to handle things because she was capable. I was capable enough to save the house, I interrupted. Do you remember that? The $25,000 I wired to keep you from losing it? Or did that slip your mind, too? The line went quiet. I heard her breathing, shallow, careful. Then came the cough. Weak, theatrical. I can't do this, she whispered. My heart, Arya, my heart. Don't, I said softly. Don't use that. I'm serious, she gasped. The doctor said I need peace. You're destroying what's left of this family. I wanted to laugh.
Peace.
That was her favorite word, her weapon of choice. Peace meant silence. Peace meant submission. Peace meant pretending things were fine, while she let Seraphine rewrite history. Mom, I said after a moment, if you're really sick, I'll come over. I'll bring whatever you need. But if this is another performance, don't expect me to play my part. I'm not performing, she said, her voice cracking perfectly. You'll regret talking to me this way when I'm gone. I hesitated. There was a part of me, the obedient daughter buried deep inside, that still reacted to those words. The one who used to drive through snowstorms just to make her soup when she claimed to have a cold. But now, even that part of me was exhausted. I'll be there in an hour, I said quietly, and hung up. The drive to her house was silent. Denver's streets were nearly empty, the city bathed in an orange haze from the streetlights. The further I drove, the tighter my chest became, not from fear, but from the weight of returning to a battlefield that never changed. When I pulled up to her house, the porch light was already on. She was waiting for me. Of course she was, framed perfectly in the doorway, wearing her silk robe, a hand pressed delicately to her chest. You came, she said, as if surprised. I said I would. She stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled the same, lavender and lemon polish, the scent of control. The living room looked untouched, immaculate, like a museum exhibit curated by guilt. She sat down on the couch, dramatically adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. I've been so dizzy, she murmured. My heart races every time you mention that will. Do you want me in the hospital? Do you want me to believe this? I asked quietly. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. The performance slipped. Then she sighed, shaking her head. You've changed, Arya. You used to be kind. You used to care. I still care, I said. Just not about the lies. She leaned forward, her voice sharpening. Family doesn't survive without forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't silence, I replied. And silence isn't love. Her expression hardened. You think you're better than us now, don't you? Sitting in your little apartment in Denver, judging everyone. I think I'm tired, I said. That's all. Her breathing steadied instantly. The heart episode was over. You're making a mistake, Arya, she said, her tone suddenly calm again. Once you break a family, it doesn't come back together. People won't remember your version of the story, only that you were the one who destroyed it. It was such a clean sentence, so practiced, that I almost admired it. My mother could weaponize morality like no one else. I stood up. If you're truly sick, I'll stay. I'll help. But if you're lying to manipulate me again, I paused, looking her directly in the eye. I promise I won't break this time. Her face froze, not anger, Not sadness, but recognition. She knew I meant it. The room was silent, the air between us heavy with years of unspoken truth. I waited a moment longer, then turned toward the door. "Arya," she called after me. Her voice softened again, almost tender. "Don't do this to yourself. You'll end up alone. Family doesn't come back once you push it away." I didn't turn around. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll finally know who left first." Outside, the night air hit my face like a slap of reality. I walked down the steps, the gravel crunching under my shoes. The street was quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. I felt lighter, not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped losing. When I got back into my car, my phone buzzed again. A new notification. This time, it wasn't from my mother. It was from Zinnia. Her message was short and trembling. "Aunt Arya, I need to talk to you. I can't keep lying anymore." I stared at it, my pulse steady but strong. The phone screen flashed in my darkened apartment long after I had drawn the curtains and settled into the hush of evening. I slid off the couch, crossed the room to the coffee table, and picked it up. The name on the caller ID read Zinnia Ashford. Video call. My niece. My little niece who had always sat behind her phone, filming wedding entrances and family brunches, a cheerful accessory to the Ashford clan's public face. I rubbed my forehead, thinking I should let it go to voicemail. After all, I had bigger things to deal with than another note of guilt from someone trying to stay safe. I hit accept. The screen split into two, Zinnia on one side, her face bright but shaking, me on the other, in my small Denver apartment, dimly lit as late evening settled in. "Arya," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to lie anymore." I leaned forward. "Okay." She inhaled sharply. "I have something you need to see. I've been watching, and I can't keep staying quiet." Time froze for a moment. I thought of all the years I'd sat on the sidelines, quiet, decent, invisible. Then I remembered the will, the video, the seat next to the trash can. All of it. And I sensed this call wasn't just another fragment of truth. It might be the turning point. "Tell me," I said gently. She stood up, camera knocking against a stack of books in her dorm room. The background shifted, Boston. She was home for spring break. She swallowed. "You know how Dad always stayed quiet?" She meant my brother Lumen. "He knows. About Mom and Seraphine. He knows the video was changed. He knows the will was manipulated." And she paused, her eyes glistening. "He did nothing." I stared at the screen. I felt the betrayal ripple outward. Not just the erasure of me, but the complicity of someone I once trusted. The brother I thought was simply passive turned out to be silent by choice. "Lumen saw the draft," Zinnia said. "He said to let it go because family doesn't need to see everything." "Why didn't he say anything?" I asked softly. "He's scared," she admitted. "And he's tired of being the good brother who doesn't rock boats." A wave of disappointment washed over me. Not for him, but for myself, for banking on someone's loyalty that never existed. I closed my eyes. I took a breath. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She nodded, tears rolling. "There's more. I filmed it, Mom and Seraphine. A week before the anniversary party. They laughed. They were drinking. Mom asked, 'Are we going to cut Arya out for good this time?' And Seraphine said, 'Yep, clean slate.'" Everything inside me swung forward. Shock. Not the gentle kind. This was raw, exposed. I stared so long I saw double. You recorded it?"
Yes.
I didn't know what else to do. I waited, then said, "Send it." The file arrived moments later. Zinnia handed me the memory stick they used for campus video projects, a little device with a gray cap. I plugged it into my laptop. The video opened, the camera fixed, shaky, capturing two voices I knew too well, my mother's and my sister's. They talked as if I wasn't there. "Mom, if she really thinks she matters, we'll show her." Seraphine, gone before she even knows what hit her. The laughter sounded pleasant in the audio, soft clinking of glasses. Like a toast. Two people celebrating something at my expense. I sat back, stomach twisting. My mind went through every moment. Evenings I spent alone so they could host dinners. Birthdays I organized while my own celebration remained private. Crises I managed so they could look good. I had helped so they could shine, and they used the brightness as a front to hide me. I closed the laptop screen, hands still trembling. I felt tired, but not broken. I felt exposed, but not helpless. I felt powerful. I hit reply all to the family group email. Attached the video file. No commentary. No explanation. Just facts. Evidence. And then I left the group email thread entirely. The whoosh of departure was sweet and simple. No extra words. No message. Silence, but heavy with meaning. My phone rang again before I could stand up. Caller ID. Family group, Ashford HQ. I ignored it. Let it ring. I poured myself a fresh mug of tea and sat near the window, watching the night outside. Denver stretched into darkness beneath me, lights glimmering like fireflies. The apartment around me seemed small, but this moment stretched large. I realized I had waited so long for someone to recognize me that I missed the chance to recognize myself. I'd paid the dues, carried the burdens, held the family line together. Yet I'd stayed quiet. But not anymore. The cable news in the background murmured about something else, a stock market drop, a mayor stepping down, a snowstorm in Iowa. I barely listened. I focused on the quiet in my chest, the stillness after the storm of my own life. A pivot. I thought about parenting, about how people raised children thinking family first meant protect the image instead of protect the person. I thought about grandparents who told grandchildren we sacrifice for you when they meant we expect from you. I held the memory of my niece's face, her fear, her courage, in that call. I thought about my father, his worn hands, his silent house, his reliance on me that I never acknowledged until it was too late. And I thought about what comes next. If this story ends with me picking up the broken pieces of that big facade, rebuilding what's real, not what's convenient. Hours later, the group chat exploded. Messages flooded. Shocked, angry, denials. Some said, "How could you, Arya? We thought you were on our side." Others, "We will seek legal counsel." Some just typed emojis out of confusion. My phone buzzed persistently. I let it go to voicemail again. In the early morning hours, I checked the message count. 28 missed calls, 2 voicemails. One from Lumen, just silent sobs. One from Seraphine, angry, and another from Mom, claiming, "I'm in the hospital," though the message had been recorded the night I was at her house. Predictable. I didn't respond. By dawn, the snow began creeping onto my apartment window. I watched the flakes come down, turning the world outside into a quiet white canvas. I felt calm. I felt aligned. I felt ready for what would come. Because this wasn't just a family confrontation anymore. It was a reckoning. And I came prepared. 3 hours after sending out the video, I was sitting at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of tea, staring at nothing. The world outside my window had turned gray, the Denver sky swollen with clouds that looked like they might burst. I had convinced myself that this was over, that silence would stretch long enough for me to finally breathe. Then came the knock. It was sharp, insistent, and too familiar. My heart sank before I even stood up. I walked to the door, my pulse steady but alert. Through the peephole, I saw 2 silhouettes, Seraphine in her tailored coat, jaw tight and eyes cold, and behind her, my mother, wrapped in her shawl, clutching it like she was auditioning for sainthood. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called out, "What do you want?" Seraphine's voice came back immediately, clipped, professional, controlled. "We need to talk, Arya. Right now." "You mean you need to yell?" I said. "Don't be childish," she snapped. "You blindsided the entire family. You humiliated us. You've gone too far this time." Behind her, Verity's voice trembled just enough to sound fragile. "Arya, please," she said softly. "Let us in. I'm not well. This stress, this fighting, it's tearing me apart." I leaned my forehead against the door for a moment, taking in the absurdity of it all. My family had shown up at my doorstep, not to apologize, not to explain, but to perform one more scene in their endless play of control. I think we can talk just fine from here, I said. Seraphine huffed, the sound of expensive frustration. You've made a fool of yourself, she said. Do you even realize the kind of damage you've done? That video, God, Arya, you sent it to everyone. Cousins, old friends, people who haven't heard from us in years. Do you have any idea how unhinged that makes you look? Unhinged, I repeated. That's a new one. I've been called invisible, difficult, dramatic, but unhinged, that's fresh. Stop being sarcastic, she snapped. Verity coughed loudly, the way she always did when she wanted to remind everyone she was the victim. Arya, please, she gasped. You're destroying this family. We've worked so hard to keep it together, to keep your father's memory alive. I closed my eyes and took a breath, counting to 3. You destroyed it the day you decided appearances mattered more than truth. That did it. I could hear Verity's sobs through the wood, exaggerated, rehearsed. How can you say that to your own mother? Because it's true. There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear the faint sound of a neighbor's door creak open down the hall. Denver apartments didn't allow for privacy, and I knew someone was already watching through a peephole of their own. Verity's voice rose an octave. Do you enjoy humiliating me? She cried. Do you enjoy making me the villain? After everything I've done for you. Mom, I interrupted sharply. Stop performing. You don't have to pretend anymore. The silence that followed was sudden, heavy. I could almost feel her blinking in surprise, recalculating her next move. Then Seraphine cut in, her tone cool again. Open the door, Arya. We can settle this like adults. I laughed softly. Adults don't manipulate wills, Seraphine. She sighed, exasperated. You don't understand how complicated that was. Dad wanted things simple. Dad wanted fairness, I said. But you and Mom wanted control. You always have. Her voice hardened. You really think anyone will believe your little martyr story? You think sending out that video makes you some kind of hero? Everyone knows you've always been the unstable one. You isolate yourself. You twist everything into betrayal. I isolate myself, I said, because that's the only way I can breathe in a family full of suffocating lies. The hallway went still again. Then came the sound I'd been expecting, Verity collapsing into tears, full volume this time. You see, Seraphine? She's cruel. She's heartless. She doesn't care about anyone but herself. I took a deep breath, turned the lock, and opened the door just wide enough to meet their eyes. My mother's mascara had streaked down her cheeks, but her breathing was fine, steady, practiced. Seraphine looked immaculate, except for the faint redness around her eyes, a crack in the armor. I stepped into the doorway, blocking their way in. You both came here for one thing, I said quietly. You want me to back down. You want me to apologize for telling the truth. But that's not happening. Seraphine folded her arms. You think you're better than us? I think I'm done pretending I'm less. I reached behind the door, picked up the envelope I'd left on the table earlier, and held it out. Here, I said. This is what you came for. Seraphine frowned but took it. What is this? Open it. She tore the flap open with a practice flick. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a notarized statement from my attorney, officially withdrawing any claim to the Ashford estate, assets, and holdings. Seraphine's expression faltered for the first time. You're kidding. No, I said. You can keep it all. The house, the money, the titles. I don't want a thing. Verity blinked, confused. Then why? Why are you doing this? Because peace is worth more than your version of family. Seraphine laughed under her breath, disbelieving. You think walking away makes you noble? You're just proving us right. You were never strong enough to fight. I smiled. No, Seraphine. I'm proving that strength isn't measured by what you keep. It's measured by what you can let go of. Her jaw clenched, a muscle twitching near her temple. She looked ready to argue, to twist this into something else, but I didn't give her the chance. You want to win?
Fine, I said.
Congratulations. You've got everything you ever wanted. But one day, when the house is quiet and the lights go off, and you realize the only thing left in that place is the echo of your own ambition, remember this moment. Verity looked at me with something between anger and disbelief. You can't mean this, she said weakly. You're my daughter. You can't just walk away. I can, I said softly. And I am. She reached out, trembling, her hand hovering in the air. Arya, please, we're still family. I stepped back, shaking my head. Family isn't about blood, Mom. It's about behavior. And you've made it clear where I stand. I took the envelope from Seraphine's hand, flipped it over, and showed them the note I'd written on the back. This was never about winning. It was about being heard. Their eyes followed the words like they were staring at something foreign, something impossible to interpret. And before either of them could respond, I closed the door. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand resting against the cool wood. I could hear them outside, Verity's muffled sobs, Seraphine's sharp whisper, the shuffle of heels retreating down the hall. Then silence. Inside, the air felt still, weightless. I walked back to the kitchen, poured the cold tea down the sink, and finally exhaled. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was something quieter, like being untied after years of being held too tight. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt free. I spent the night staring at boxes in my living room, the kind I'd once used for storage, now filled with the remnants of a life I was ready to leave behind. The email had arrived early this morning, the HR folder labeled urgent, personnel review, the subject line allegation of misuse of company funds. Even before I'd opened it, I felt the air shift. I knew this fight wasn't over. It had just changed battlegrounds. By the time I got into the office that morning, the usual hum felt different. My badge slid through the reader, and I walked past the coffee machine without grabbing my usual latte. The hallways of the health system's administrative wing always felt too bright, too sterile, like they were designed to hide rather than illuminate. I sat down at my desk and saw the email from HR waiting. I clicked it open. Subject: Anonymous complaint received. Content: We have received verified allegations of embezzlement of family foundation funds and unusual emotional behavior impacting workflow. Attached: the forwarded message with metadata. Send date: last night. Sender domain: Seraphine Ashford's law firm office. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. And all I felt was a cold emptiness. Triumph was supposed to feel different. This was their move, the last one I suspected. My boss, Linda, called me into the break room. Her face was sympathetic but tight. Arya, she said, I'm really sorry you're dealing with this. We've got to place you on paid leave while we investigate. It's standard procedure. Paid leave, I repeated, the words echoing. So the rumor says I stole from my family foundation, and I'm being suspended until someone proves otherwise? She nodded. It's not proof yet, Arya. But you understand how it looks. The domain information, the forwarded message, it's serious. I nodded, too. Yes, I understand perfectly. I left her office and walked the long corridor back to my desk. The floor felt familiar, same gray carpet, same flickering lights, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was walking through someone else's story. I logged out of the system, packed my personal bag quietly, and left without telling anyone. I didn't wave, didn't acknowledge the few colleagues who looked up. My feet carried me through the sliding glass doors and into the crisp midday air. The sun was higher now, bright but distant, like it had gone through the wrong filter. Back in my apartment, boxes in the living room stacked like monuments. I took a deep breath. I'd waited on recognition and approval for decades. I'd sought fairness, validation. Now I realized they were never going to deliver it. So I had to take something better. Freedom. That night I did 3 things. Listed my apartment for rent, called Linda to submit my resignation, effective immediately, and booked a one-way ticket to a small cottage in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where no one knew my last name, where the Ashford legacy didn't follow me. I typed a brief email to the board of directors. Please accept my resignation from the compliance department, effective immediately. I am grateful for the opportunities I've had. I hit send and sat back. The silence in the room no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like space. I returned to the boxes and dragged one into the kitchen. Inside were artifacts of the life I was done defending. Years of awards, certificates of volunteer work, my father's faded model airplane, the one he built when I was a child, and we painted it together. I picked up that small plane and held it tight. This, I whispered, is mine. On the drive past Denver County line, pale dusk wrapping around me like a promise, my phone buzzed. Message from Lumen. I'm sorry. I should have done more. I stared at the words, then slid the phone back into the console with a quiet click. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because I was done with explanations. I had enough. Inside the rental car, I looked at the rearview mirror and saw my reflection, hair pulled back, jacket zipped, eyes a little tired but set. The road ahead stretched wide and empty. I turned up the road's radio to a folk song about redemption, letting the notes carry me into something new. The last glimmer of Denver's skyline faded behind me. I pressed down on the accelerator and felt something loosen inside me. Not like falling, more like letting go. As I drove into the desert dusk, sweat beating at my temples not from fear but from release, I thought of my father's words. She should scare you. They had been warning. I let them go. I didn't look back. I still hear the hum of Denver's lights turning off behind me, the way the city exhaled and shut its doors as I drove away. 2 months later, I wake up to a new rhythm, a breeze curling around the adobe porch, birds calling across the canyon, the smell of juniper and desert sage hanging in the air. I'm in Santa Fe now, in a small cottage with terracotta tiles and wooden beams, a place where no one knows my last name or my family's legacy. I volunteer twice a week at a local literacy center, an organization much like the Literacy Volunteers of Santa Fe that tutors adults in reading and writing. Literacy Volunteers of Santa Fe, plus when I walk in on Wednesday mornings, the sun just rising, the sky unsure whether to stay pale or deepen into the day. I greet students who arrive with hesitant smiles, some shaking hands, others just enough courage to sit in a chair and begin. I pull out reading materials, coffee, the sound of pages turning. It's quiet work, but it feels real. For once, I'm building instead of being erased. And yet, beneath the calm, the ache remains. I don't pretend it's gone. The pain of being overlooked, the years stacked behind me like stones, those don't disappear simply because I changed my zip code. They soften. They shift. But I still feel them when sunset brings shadows and the house creaks under the silence. I recently picked up a journal and wrote a list. Before I set it aside, I read it back.
Lost.
My job, taken by false claim. The family that refused to see me. My surname used in headlines and then wiped out. The illusion that love was unconditional.
Gained.
Sleep that isn't haunted by whispers of you don't belong. A future I choose, not one prescribed by others. A voice that no longer trembles when I say my name. It surprised me how many pages the list filled when I allowed myself the space to grieve and to hope. I didn't write bitterness. I wrote clarity. I didn't ask for fair. I asked for honest. In the past weeks, I've learned what justice looks like when it isn't loud. It's quiet investigations behind closed doors. My sister's law firm under scrutiny for using company servers to send anonymous defamation complaints. My brother's license being reviewed for professional misconduct in a case I'll never see. My mother, Verity, finally hospitalized, not for a staged collapse but real. She's failing now, and for once, I don't visit. Because the visit itself would become another play, and I refuse my presence to be a prop. I wrote her a letter last week, long, messy, tender. I didn't send it. I tore it into small pieces on the kitchen counter and fed it into the fireplace. The flames devoured the words. You wanted my silence. You got my flame. The ashes fell into yesterday's tray. Tomorrow they blow away with the wind. The desert around my cottage glows orange at twilight. I walk the trail behind the house, boots crunching dry brush, the horizon broad and forgiving. Here, the sky opens wide in a way Denver's skyline never did. I stop at a rock outcrop and sit, inhaling the cool air, feeling the bruise of the past fade just enough to be a memory, not a wound. I remember my father from that day. He repaired my bike in the backyard. Just me, him, the single wrench, and silence that didn't feel dangerous. That brief moment was the last time I felt safe in the family. I whisper into the wind. I deserved more, but I gave myself enough to begin again. It might sound small, but for someone who measured worth in somebody else's validation, it's a radical act. I'm not crying out for a comeback. I'm creating a comeback. By the time I'm heading back to the cottage and the stars are out, I already know. Healing isn't about forgetting the cost. It's about recognizing what you paid, and then choosing what you'll never pay again. The silence here doesn't scare me. I don't fill it with trophies or echoes of what should have been. I fill it with presence. With notebooks of volunteer sign-in sheets. With local grocery visits where nobody says, "Hi Aria, the family." Just "Hi Aria." With mornings where the coffee's black, the porch quiet, and the day ahead unclaimed. I've accepted that I may always carry the imprint of what was done to me. A name missing from a will. A segment omitted from a tribute. A position lost because someone decided I needed to vanish to make the show work. But I've also accepted something else. I no longer carry their version of me. I've let go of the house, the money, the expectation. The family image that demanded I shrink to sustain it. I've traded it for the view of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, for a sense of agency. I walk past the window each morning, patchy curtains drawn back, and see light streaming in unfiltered and censored. That light reminds me of one simple truth. No one else defines me. This story doesn't end. Life rarely does in the neat way people want for their favorite shows. There will be days of doubt. Nights of longing, news of lawsuits that probe all the corners of what we built and what we unraveled. My mother might ask me again for forgiveness. My brother might call when the dust settles. My sister might circle back with an apology or a denial or a demand. I'll listen. I might reply, but I'll do so from the place I choose now, not the one I was given. The wind outside picks up, stirring the chimes by the porch, creating a steady, gentle rhythm. I stand at the edge of the trail and breathe slow. Not the breath of someone hiding, but the breath of someone arriving. And then I turn and walk back inside. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness, it's survival. When the people closest to us refuse to hear our voice, the most powerful thing we can do is use it elsewhere. Aria's story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming peace, even if it means letting go of everything you once called home. Have you ever had to choose peace over people? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if this